Secularism in India, that what kind of entity it is, whether it is the same as what you find in the West, or whether it's different, whether there's an Indian version of secularism, what is its content and so on, was supposed to be the issue before the platform session, but unfortunately the dialogue really didn't take place. So instead what we have is an opportunity to reflect on the terms of that debate, and given some of the points that were made during the debate. So I'll ask, to start with, I'll ask Evan to make an initial presentation on, and even say what is it that you would like to
I do work on religious toleration in colonial America and early modern Europe, and that's my where I was coming from. I think so I have some more broader observations that came to me while watching the debate or lack of debate, and I think I told Balu this, that though he was obviously frustrated that the debate did not work out in the form that he had hoped for. People did not stick to the rules, they didn't debate the particular terms and so forth. Overall, as a sort of learning event, to use more touchy-feely pedagogical terms, for the audience in general, I think it was very effective. I think we were able to see many aspects of the problem and dimensions of the issue that gave us much to think about, and was very elucidating, even if nothing actually was resolved in the debate itself. My impression coming out of the debate is, well, I guess I have three different points to make. First of all, the question, the debate was centered on this question of is secularism the solution to communal conflict in India? And it's kind of a provocative question, sort of in some ways perhaps a little bit limited. And also, I think maybe part of the problem, or part of the frustration for the organizers, is that the question kind of distracted from what they're really interested in, which I think is, what is secularism itself? And I'm wondering if maybe the conversation might have worked differently if that itself had been set as the question. Because that seemed to really be what much of what was happening on the stage, is sort of an enactment of two vigorous proponents of secularism and two others who were trying to rethink or analyze or define secularism. And there was two different sort of tensions going on there. Between the one hand, the desire to come up with a very precise and consistent and coherent understanding and definition of the term, and on the other hand, from the two advocates of secularism, I think we saw something that historians like me get much more interested in often, because this is often what is more important in terms of historical action than the precise philosophical meaning, which is rather what people understand by secularism, or what they associate with secularism. And some of the things that came out of this were modernity, democracy, clearly nationalism. There was a very, I think, a strong sense of Indian nationalism tied to this idea of secularism, none of which necessarily has anything to do with what secularism strictly construed might be. And I think that's part of what the conflict was, is that there were two different relationships to this. I was also wondering why it was this, again, being an outsider, why the question of secularism was tied exclusively to communal violence. Just the one sort of association I had always had, from my limited understanding, is the question of Kashmir, which didn't really get brought up more much. But as I sort of understand it, that one of the reasons that the Indian secular state is so determined to hold on to Kashmir is because it sees that as a critical component of its understanding of itself as a secular, non-denominational state. And I think that might have also been part of what happened with the slippage of the defendants, of the secularists on the panel, is that they went international, they're referring to all sorts of things, and they didn't stick to the communal violence, again, because for them the word secularism has a whole variety of other associations. So that's the first issue. The second one that seemed to underlie this for me was a question of Western versus indigenous Indian influences or ideas and sources. And this came out at one point, and Nero is accusing Jacob of Orientalism and imperialism. Sort of, they kept thinking that by pointing out that secularism has its roots in this Christian Protestant theology and experience, that they were somehow then imposing Western ideas on Indians and India, where they were very intent to establish that, no, we've made it our own, this is our own thing. This, again, is where I see a lot of the nationalism attached to it. And I'm just sort of curious why this is, and so on both sides, this does seem to be an important issue, to sort out the Western Christian, Protestant, British influences from the indigenous Indian. Part of what came through to me is how incredibly complicated this was, because we had some Indians very sort of vehemently defending this concept, which the others were sort of describing, pointing out has these very Western Protestant origins. And so I'm wondering, so this does seem to be, and I'm wondering, again, as an outsider, why this is so important. Also in the light of the previous panel, where we have this picture of India as a place of adaptation and accommodation and assimilation of outside forces going back for millennium, and why is it that this British colonial experience is so disturbing and cannot be so easily folded into that pattern, and why does it have to be teased out in ways that Mughals, Persians, Turks, whoever else was here earlier, does not seem to be such an issue. And the final point comes from my own expertise in working on toleration, and just to bring my sense of what this means and the question that come out from this. I think toleration, perhaps like secularism, is one of those things where everybody thinks they know what it means, and nobody understands it in quite exactly the same way. And I just wanted to point out that toleration, it's never a neutral, it's impossible to be neutral in terms of toleration, because it's always this sort of dynamic of something or someone tolerating someone else. And of course the roots of toleration are in the sense of putting up with something that's really annoying or painful or disturbing and you cannot get rid of, but you have to tolerate, at least until a point that you can do away with it. So there's always a somewhat condescending aspect to it. But the other thing is that you can never, toleration never ends. You can never complete, there's a sense that came out in this conversation, and it's often brought up with toleration, is that, well, we have some toleration, but not enough, or there's more toleration here than over there. The implication being that if only we had full toleration or absolute toleration, everything would be fine, or the conflicts would be over, but that's impossible. Toleration is a fundamentally relational concept, a relational term, it's always ongoing. How that dynamic looks varies over time, but you can never stop. You can never say this is it. We have achieved toleration, because it's not a singular entity. Instead, there's sort of it's a range. I describe it as it's a variety of ways of managing religious differences. And there's no single way that is the true form of toleration or the better form of toleration or the lesser form of toleration on any sort of objective scale. Instead, there's always a very subjective relationship
You'll
here.
get a chance to come back. So maybe
Yes, that was my last. So I'm done.
Thanks.